There is something about a cabin that promises safety, the wood, the quiet, the door with a lock you control. Tonight we're spending time in 3 of them, and none of them delivered on that promise. The third story, I need you to stay for the third story. Not because of what the narrator saw. Because of what she realized had been watching her the entire time she thought she was alone. Stay with me. The smell in the back room. I do environmental compliance work for a living. Soil samples, water testing, site inspections. It's not glamorous, but it pays well and I'm good at it. That October, my company sent me to Clearwater County in northern Idaho to assess a former mining parcel near a seasonal lake. No cell service. No other inspectors. Just me, a government-issued truck, and a rental cabin 6 miles down a forest road that Google Maps had labeled, incorrectly, as a through road. The cabin belonged to a private landowner who leased it seasonally to hunters. The property manager had left a lockbox on the door with a code. I arrived around 4:15 in the afternoon. The light was already going orange. It was clean enough. Pine walls. A wood stove. 2 bedrooms off a short hallway. The kitchen had a handwritten note about the well pump and a laminated list of emergency numbers that hadn't been updated since 2009. I set my equipment cases by the door and started making dinner. I noticed the smell around 7 o'clock. It was faint at first. I thought it was the wood stove, old ash, maybe, or something in the walls. Cabin smell. I've stayed in enough of them to know they all have their own particular decay. But this was something underneath the normal smell. Something warmer. I walked the hallway. Both bedroom doors were open. The smell was stronger near the second one, the one I wasn't using. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Bed, dresser, window with the curtain drawn. Nothing unusual. I pulled the curtain back and checked the window latch. Locked. I went to bed at 10 and told myself it was probably a mouse that hadn't made it out of the walls. At 2:40 in the morning I woke up and the smell was in my room. Not faint. Present. The kind of thing your body registers before your mind does. I was sitting upright before I knew why. I sat there in the dark for a long moment, listening. Wind. The wood stove ticking as it cooled. Nothing else. I got up. Checked the doors. Both locked. I walked the cabin with my phone flashlight and found nothing except that the smell was centered, definitively, unmistakably centered, around the hatch in the back of the second bedroom closet. I hadn't noticed the hatch before. It was a crawl space access. Standard enough in older builds. About 2 feet square, with a simple hook latch. The hook was in the closed position. I stood there for probably 2 minutes. I'm not someone who panics. I run site inspections at active remediation zones. I've worked next to contaminated groundwater and industrial equipment and men who didn't want me there. I know what a risk assessment feels like. This didn't feel like a risk I could assess. I took my sleeping bag and my car keys and I slept in the truck with the doors locked and the engine running every hour for warmth. In the morning I called the property manager from the end of the road where I got half a bar of signal. I told him about the smell and the hatch and asked when the cabin had last been fully inspected. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said someone had broken into the cabin the previous spring. They'd never figured out how. Nothing was taken. The only sign of entry was that the hatch in the back closet had been found unlatched. He said that like it was the end of the story. I filed my site report. I didn't mention the smell. I'm still not sure why. The next person didn't have the option of sleeping in their truck. 4-wheeler tracks. My wife and I rented a cabin outside of Idaho, Georgia for our 10th anniversary. Late September. The leaves were just starting to turn and she'd wanted to do something in the mountains for years. We found the place on a vacation rental site, 5 stars, 80-some reviews, a wraparound porch with rocking chairs. It looked like the kind of place you see on a coffee mug. We arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The owner, a man named Dale who communicated entirely through the app, had left the door unlocked per the listing instructions. The cabin was everything the photos promised. Exposed beams, a stone fireplace, a kitchen stocked with local honey and a handwritten welcome note. Saturday was when things shifted. I'd gone out to the porch around 6 in the morning with coffee while my wife slept in. The property backed up to about 40 acres of private timberland, dense Georgia pines, a creek somewhere in there, a gravel maintenance road running the eastern edge. Quiet. That specific mountain morning quiet where you can hear the creek a quarter-mile off. That's when I saw the tracks. 4-wheeler tracks in the soft dirt at the edge of our cleared yard, running parallel to the tree line. Fresh enough that the edges hadn't dried. They went right along the yard, not through it, but alongside it, and disappeared back into the trees near the eastern corner of the property. I told myself it was the landowner. Timber people do maintenance. It meant nothing. But the tracks were there again Sunday morning. Same line. Same direction. Same distance from the porch, maybe 30 yards out. I hadn't heard anything in the night. I stood there with my second cup of coffee trying to figure out the timing. The tracks looked overnight fresh. The dirt near them was still dark with dew moisture. I messaged Dale through the app. Asked if he had maintenance scheduled on the property. He replied within the hour, no, nothing scheduled, the timber lease had been dormant since spring. He asked if anything was wrong. I said no. I don't know why I said no. That night I woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound I could not identify for a long moment. A low, intermittent mechanical idle. Like something parked. I lay there and listened and my wife shifted beside me and I thought, very clearly, very deliberately, I am not going to look out that window. It ran for maybe 4 minutes. Then it stopped. In the morning the tracks were there again. This time they came closer to the porch. Maybe 15 yards. And they didn't run parallel to the tree line this time. They circled. The full perimeter of the cleared yard, a slow, patient loop. Starting and ending at the same gap in the tree line. Unhurried. Like someone taking their time. We left a day early. My wife thought it was because I had a work thing Monday. I let her think that. I still haven't told her about the third morning. I went back to the listing a few weeks later to write a review. The cabin had been delisted. Dale's account was gone. The listing URL returned a page not found error. I've looked for it a few times since then. It's not there. That last story came from someone who spent 60 days in that cabin, and the thing that unsettles me most is how long it waited before it let her notice. She'd already made the bed. I'm a travel nurse. I've been doing it for 6 years, contracts in places I've never been, short-term rentals, living out of a duffel bag. You get used to unfamiliar spaces. You get good at reading a place quickly, figuring out the rhythms of it, what's normal and what isn't. That skill did not help me in Eureka Springs, Arkansas last February. The cabin was listed as a private rental through a nurse housing platform my agency used. Owner managed, off the main tourist strip, discounted rate for a 60-day contract stay. It was small, 1 bedroom, a sitting room, a kitchen that shared a wall with the bathroom. Old Ozark construction. The kind of place where you can hear the pipes in the walls when the heat kicks on. The owner, a woman I'll call Mrs. Pruitt, met me on arrival. 70s. quiet. She lived in the main house about 200 yards up the hill and said to come to her with any problems. She handed me the key on a wooden fob and showed me the cabin's quirks, the hot water tap that needed a minute, the back door that swelled in cold weather. Standard landlord orientation. I settled in. The first 2 weeks were fine. Long shifts at the hospital. Come home, eat, sleep. The cabin was cold in the way old cabins are cold, the kind you can't fully chase out, but nothing alarming. The first thing I noticed was the bedroom. I make my bed every morning. I'm particular about it, military corners, pillow arrangement, a habit from years of moving through temporary spaces. It's one of the things I do to make a place feel like mine. One Tuesday I came home from a 12-hour night shift and the bed was made. I thought I'd done it before I left. I was exhausted. Night shifts do things to your memory. But it happened again. And then again. And on the 4th time I was certain I had left that morning in a hurry. There'd been a call from the charge nurse while I was getting dressed and I had walked out with the sheets half off the mattress. I remembered it. I'd felt a small specific guilt about it on my commute. The bed was made when I came home. Neat. Hospital corners. I went up to the main house and knocked. Mrs. Pruitt answered. I asked her, carefully, if anyone had access to the cabin while I was at work. Maintenance, cleaning service, anyone. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. She said no. She said she respected her tenant's privacy. She said she hadn't been in the cabin since I moved in. I believed her. That was the part that scared me. I changed the lock that week, new hardware from the hardware store in town, installed it myself. New key. Didn't give a copy to anyone. 3 days later I came home to a made bed. I sat down on the floor of the bedroom and I stayed there for a long time. I went through every rational explanation. Sleepwalking, I'd never done it, but I researched it. Dissociation from shift work. I called my sister and talked for an hour without telling her the real reason I was calling. Then I started thinking about the other things. The dish towel that moved. The chair that was angled differently. Small things I dismissed as my own absent-mindedness. I started photographing the room before I left for each shift. The photos didn't show anything unusual. Nothing ever moved in them. But on one of the last nights of my contract, reviewing them side by side, before and after, I noticed something that I've spent months trying to explain away. The indentation on the other pillow. Every single after photo. A slight depression. Like something had been resting there. I finished my contract. I didn't say anything to Mrs. Pruitt when I returned the key. She watched me pull away from the main house with that same expression, not suspicious, not guilty. Patient. Like she'd done this before. Like she'd watch me go and then watch the next one arrive. I don't know what was in that cabin. I don't know if I'm more afraid that it was something she knew about, or something she didn't. 3 cabins. 3 people who did everything right. They locked the doors, they asked reasonable questions, they looked for reasonable explanations. It didn't matter. Some places have already decided what they are before you arrive. Tonight I want to ask you something specific. Have you ever stayed somewhere and felt, in the quietest part of the night, that the space around you was occupied in a way you couldn't account for? Leave it in the comments. I read them. New stories arrive here every day. Subscribe if you want them. And the next time you're somewhere remote and something small seems out of place, a chair moved, a smell that wasn't there before, I hope you remember that the people in tonight's stories noticed those things too.